Okay, let's dive in. Imagine you're inside one of these huge companies, thousands of people, multiple buildings, and someone asks, hey, how many computers do we actually own? Seems simple, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
But tackling these really big fundamental problems in large organizations, it often sends you down a path you totally didn't expect.
And that's exactly the journey we're exploring today. We're basing this entirely on a specific you shared a personal account, actually. It's from someone who was right in the thick of building an asset management system over, well, quite a long time.
Not just counting computers, it sounds like. More like bringing some order to the tech chaos.
Precisely. And our mission here is to really dig into this specific story, pull out the key lessons, and see what this experience tells us about why these foundational problems pop up and, what it actually takes to sort them out.
What grabs me right away from this account is the mismatch. The plan versus what happened. Getting a grip on all the assets, computers, phones, those little security tokens, it was planned as a, 9-month project?
Yeah, 9 months. That was the initial scope.
And the reality?
Yeah.
How long did they actually spend building and improving it?
5 years.
5 years. Wow. Okay, so that's our big question then, based just on this source. Why did something that sounds pretty straightforward, why did it stretch into a 5-year marathon? And what kind of unexpected hurdles did they run into?
Well, the source gives a pretty vivid starting point. You've got thousands of staff, all needing gear, but nobody has a reliable count of how many computers are even out there. IT was, like you often see, totally bogged down in just fighting fires, patching things, rolling out software, just keeping the basic services running.
Reactive mode, basically.
Totally reactive. The idea of proactively tracking every single asset, it felt, well, almost like a luxury they couldn't afford. The source actually compares the first meeting about it to physicists arguing about the age of the universe.
Really? How so?
Because different teams had completely different ways of counting the computers, and surprise, surprise, they all got wildly a different number.
Ah, okay, so that's the first big thing this story shows us, isn't it?
I think so. In these big, complex places, even basic facts like how many computers can be incredibly hard to pin down. It's not just like an admin headache. It actually stops you from managing things effectively.
So what did they do? How did they decide to approach it? Especially with, as the source mentions, no dedicated budget.
Right, no budget. They laid out a kind of step-by-step plan, according to the source. First, figure out how big the problem really is. Second, stop it getting worse. Third, start cleaning up the existing mess. And fourth, plan ahead. And resource-wise, they decided to use what they had, an existing enterprise SQL server, to build their central database.
Okay, smart use of existing resources. So step one was, understanding the people involved, the staff using the gear.
Exactly, getting a handle on the staff. The first data feed they pulled was from HR.
Ah, HR data. The source points out something important there, especially back then, right? About HR systems being kind of isolated.
Yeah, silos. Often they weren't really built to easily share clean, structured data with, say, IT. And they needed specific things for each employee. Unique network ID, name, manager, department, location, division, also their last day if they were leaving, and an email. Quite a detailed list.
And pulling that together wasn't straightforward, I guess.
Well, this immediately highlights another classic challenge, doesn't it? Data quality. Especially when you mix data from different systems. HR data, as the source puts it, is a moving target. People join, they move, they leave every single day.
So a weekly data dump wasn't going to cut it.
Nope. They quickly realized they needed daily updates just to have a reasonably accurate picture. And there's a telling detail. The author notes that every team supplying data was absolutely convinced their data was perfect.
Which turned out to be.
Overly optimistic is the phrase used. So lesson 2. Integrating data across silos is messy, assuming data quality is perfect. Yeah, don't do that.
Okay, so they wrestled the HR data into shape, got it flowing daily. Now they know who should be there. But then, scope creep.
You guessed it, scope creep. They found out that when people left, the team handling physical ID cards often wasn't told consistently.
Oh, so ex-employees might still have active security cards. Not good.
Not good at all. Security risk, plus ongoing costs for those cards. So ID cards got added to the tracking list.
Makes sense. What else?
Then mobile phones, driven by costs, those needed tracking too. And then security tokens, those little things for VPN access.
Yeah, the key fobs or cards.
Right. Security mandate meant those had to be tracked too. Who has which token?
So this gives us another insight, doesn't it? Solving one core problem starts pulling threads on other related messy areas.
Exactly. Insight 3. Tackling one foundational issue often reveals a whole network of other things that aren't being properly managed. ID cards, phones, tokens, none had a clear picture.
Okay, so after people, they moved to step 2, getting data on the computers themselves.
That's right. They tapped into the system IT already used for patching and deploying software, which was handy because it had hardware details.
But I sense another but coming.
There's always a but. That system could only tell them the last person who logged into a machine.
Not necessarily the assigned owner or user.
Correct. And then they hit the issue of shared computers machines used by multiple people. That complicated things, again, expanded the scope.
So they needed more than just a list. They needed statuses, like is it owned, shared, in repair?
Precisely. Owned by one person, shared resource, or maybe with IT for repair, or just sitting in storage. It became about ownership and current status, not just hardware specs.
And even with that data flowing in, they knew it wasn't complete. The source mentioned some interesting user behaviors.
Yes, specifically 2 things that were messing up the data. 1, managers holding onto computers when staff left, just stashing them in cupboards.
Hoarding, the classic manager step.
And 2, managers buying computers directly using their own budgets, bypassing procurement, and then bringing them to IT later to get them on the network.
Ooh, shadow IT procurement. That also creates data gaps.
Big time. And this hoarding thing, it had a direct, quite annoying technical consequence mentioned in the source.
Go on, this sounds good.
The system they used for computer data. It had this feature or bug, depending on your view, where it would automatically delete records for computers that hadn't connected to the network in a while.
You're kidding. So the computer in the cupboard just vanishes from the list.
Goof. Gone from the system. And then months later, when the manager finally plugs it back in,
it can't connect because the system doesn't recognize it anymore, which means
a help desk call. And since they didn't have the resources, time, or money for a massive manual audit, walking around checking thousands of machines, well, they needed a different approach.
they had to get creative.
Very creative.
Yeah.
And this leads to what the source presents as maybe the most critical insight, number 4. Sometimes the best way to get accurate data isn't purely technical. It's about involving the actual users.
Okay, how do they do that?
This is where the personal inventory website comes in. The source calls it pivotal. They built a simple web page. Every staff member could log in and see a list of everything the system thought was assigned to them: computer, phone, token, ID card.
And then
2 options. Click a button. Yep, this is all correct. Or click another button. Nope, something's wrong, which let them raise an exception explaining the issue.
crowdsourcing the data validation.
Pretty much. The source says it was a game changer. They pushed it hard internally before launch, sent weekly reminders to people who hadn't checked.
Why was it such a game changer? Must have created a lot of initial work checking exceptions.
Oh, it generated a flood of exceptions at first, yes. But it provided that essential reality check. It forced the reconciliation between the system's view and what was actually out there on desks or, in cupboards.
So Insight 5, empowering the users, democratizing data validation, can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely. And alongside that user-facing site, they also built something for the IT support teams.
An internal tool.
Yeah, a client application. It let IT staff query the central database, see all the assets assigned to a user, eventually even software licenses, and crucially, update ownership directly during a support call, like when swapping out a machine.
Closing the loop faster.
Right. And updating the record also triggered an email back to the user asking them to reconfirm their inventory on the website. Continuous validation.
Clever.
They also set up logical collections in the system for IT, like virtual bins for machines, awaiting repair, awaiting destruction, held in stock, etc. And critically, the system kept a full audit trail. No computer record was ever truly deleted, just moved between owners or state.
So you always had the history. That sounds like Insight 6. Internal tools for the people actually handling the assets are just as vital as user-facing ones.
Definitely. You need both sides.
The source mentions some automated rules, too. Things the system did by itself.
Yeah, some neat ones, like if a computer the system thought was unassigned suddenly had someone log into it, bang, automatically added to that user's personal inventory, prompting them to confirm.
Proactive assignment based on usage.
Exactly. Or if someone logged into a computer marked as destroyed.
Oh, that should raise a red flag.
Big red flag. That immediately alerted IT to investigate because clearly it hadn't been destroyed. So these automated checks just added another layer of keeping the data clean.
And what about when people left? That was a problem earlier with ID cards. Did this help?
Big improvement there, too. They extended the personal inventory view so managers could see the assets listed for their team members who were leaving.
Ah, so the manager is now responsible for getting the gear back before the person walks out the door.
Precisely. They could ensure it was returned to IT or properly reassigned. And crucially, this finally gave the ID card team timely notifications about who was leaving, closing that security loop.
Which is insight number 7, maybe. Fixing that core data problem started fixing other process problems downstream in different departments.
That's a great way to put it. It rippled outwards.
And with cleaner data, could they finally start seeing the bigger picture for planning and stuff?
Yes, exactly. With growing confidence in the data, they could generate useful reports. Senior IT could finally see the age profile of all the computers, plan replacements strategically.
And could they find those hoarded machines?
They could identify assets that hadn't connected to the network and age's prime suspects for being hidden in cupboards. It gave them targets for investigation.
So looking back at this whole 5-year saga from the source, what was the real breakthrough?
The author really emphasizes 2 things. That personal inventory website was key. Involving the entire staff was the turning point. It finally gave them that clear, reliable picture of what IT actually needed to support and manage.
And you mentioned PowerBASIC.
Ah, yes, the final specific detail from the source. The programming language used for the whole system, web, and client side. PowerBASIC, which, just underlines the ingenuity involved, using the tools available, sticking with it for 5 years to crack a really tough fundamental problem.
So wrapping this up, what does this deep dive into one specific project's story really tell you listening? I think it shows that getting a handle on something seemingly basic, like knowing how many computers you have in a big organization, it's not just admin. It's a really complex multi-year challenge.
Yeah, it exposes hidden behaviors like hoarding. It forces you to be ingenious. When you lack resources, you have to wrestle with messy data across different departments.
Requires real collaboration, long-term commitment, just to build and refine a solution for something that feels like it should be easy. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What other things that seem simple on the surface in organizations or systems you interact with? Maybe knowing a project's true status or exactly what's in inventory somewhere or who's really responsible for a task. What other simple things might be hiding similar layers of surprising complexity, just waiting for someone to start pulling on those threads? Thanks for tuning in for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.